He handed me the invoice for his luxury wedding and told me to hide my hands during the photos. He said I didn't fit the aesthetic of the dynasty he was building. He thought the old contractor was just a worn-out checkbook to be drained and discarded. He didn't know that while he was planning a wedding, I was planning a hostile takeover. He was about to find out that I don't just build skyscrapers. I know exactly how to bring them down. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps to know I'm not just talking to the wind. It all began when I took a hard look at myself. My hands are not pretty. They are geological formations, shaped by the slow, grinding tectonic plates of labor. I looked down at them, resting heavily on the polished glass table of the wedding planner's office. The glass was cool, sterile, and terrified me in a way that hanging 50 stories up on a steel girder never did. My hands were wide, flat and scarred, a landscape of trauma. The skin resembled old leather that had been left out in the driving rain and baked in the merciless sun until it lost all memory of softness. My knuckles were swollen, arthritic knots twice the size of a normal man's. They were misshapen maps of my life. 40 years, that's how long these hands have gripped. Framing hammers, hauled freezing rebar, and fought the stubborn frozen earth of winter construction sites in Chicago and New York. I flexed my fingers slowly, a dull ache, familiar as an old friend, and nagging as unpaid debt, pulsed through the joints. It was the weather ache, the kind that tells you a storm is coming long before the barometer drops. And looking across the table, I knew a storm was definitely coming. If you'd yug at my hands, you would see a laborer. You would see the man who comes to fix your sink on a Sunday because he needs the overtime. You would see the guy patching your roof in the driving rain, water streaming down a yellow slicker. You wouldn't see the truth. You wouldn't see the structural calculations running through my head. You wouldn't see the man who founded O'Connell Infrastructure from a single pickup truck and a loan from a dying uncle. You wouldn't see the man who built the suspension bridges these people drive their luxury German cars on, oblivious to the tension cables holding them above the abyss. And you certainly wouldn't see the man who could buy this entire building and the 3 city blocks surrounding it with a single signature on a check. But in this room, inside the fragrant, suffocating office of elegance and ivory, none of that mattered. Here, I was just the wallet, and a dirty one at that. The boutique smelled aggressively of lavender and old money, that specific scent of crisp linen, fresh-cut flowers, and the silence that costs $500 an hour. It was a silence designed to make you feel small, so you would spend big to fill the void. Across from me sat my daughter, Sarah. She looked small, smaller than I had ever seen her. I remember her at 7 years old, running through sawdust piles in oversized work boots, her laughter bouncing off the steel beams of a skeleton skyscraper. She used to be vibrant, a creature of color and noise. She was the one thing I had built that was perfect from the foundation up. But lately, she seemed to be shrinking, condensing under some invisible pressure. Her shoulders were hunched forward, a defensive posture I recognized from men expecting a blow. Her eyes were always darting around, scanning the room, looking for approval she never seemed to get. She looked like a bird in a cage made of gold, terrified that if she sang, she'd be punished. Next to her was Kevin. Kevin was 32, but he carried himself with the unearned confidence of a man who has never had to dig a hole. He had a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror for hours. Maximum teeth, zero warmth. His eyes were dead things, flat and shark-like, assessing the world only in terms of what it could yield. His suit fit too tightly. It was a trendy, electric blue Italian cut that probably cost more than my first 3 work trucks combined. He was checking his watch, a heavy, ostentatious timepiece that screamed for attention. He tapped his foot against the delicate table leg. Tap, tap, tap. He was vibrating with an impatience that set my teeth on edge. It wasn't just anxiety. It was the vibration of a man who thinks his time is worth exponentially more than yours. It was the frequency of arrogance. "Frank," Kevin said. He didn't use Mr. O'Connell. He stopped doing that the day he saw my bank statement. He didn't look at me. He was staring intently at the invoice on the table, frowning as if he could intimidate the numbers into changing, through sheer force will. "We need to expedite the deposit. The venue requires it by noon today, or we lose the date." He flicked the paper with a manicured finger. The sound was sharp, dismissive, and we added the raw bar. My father loves oysters. It's non-negotiable. I leaned forward. The expensive leather chair creaked loudly under my weight, a sound of protest in this pristine room. The raw bar is an extra $5,000, Kevin, I said. My voice is gravel. It is low and rough, cured by decades of shouting over diesel generators, jackhammers, and the howling wind of high-altitude girders. It is a voice that doesn't do gentle well, even when I try. We agreed on a budget, I continued, keeping my tone level. $5,000 is a lot of money for shellfish that half the guests won't eat. Kevin sighed. It was a loud, theatrical sound, like a luxury tire losing air. He turned to Sarah, rolling his eyes, as if I were a child who couldn't grasp the alphabet. Babe? Explain it to him, he said, his voice dripping with a fatigue that suggested he carried the weight of the world rather than just his own ego. My parents are flying in from Geneva. They are accustomed to a certain caliber of event. He gestured teagily with his hand, a fanning motion as if wafting away a bad smell. The smell of my practicality. We can't serve them chicken and domestic beer, Frank. It reflects poorly on me, on us, on the merger of our families. Sarah looked at me. Her eyes were pleading, wet with unshed tears. Dad, please, she whispered. Her voice was thin, brittle. It's important to Richard and Nancy. She twisted the fabric of her dress in her lap, her knuckles white. I watched her hands. They were the only part of her that told the truth. They have friends coming, investors, she added, her voice dropping to a murmur. I looked at her, really looked at her. I searched for the little girl who used to help me sand drywall, but she was buried under layers of anxiety and expectation. Investors, I repeated. The word tasted like copper. I leaned back, crossing my massive arms over my chest. The fabric of my flannel shirt strained. I thought this was a wedding, Sarah. Not a board meeting, not a quarterly review. Kevin laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cold, sharp bark, like a fox in the night. In my world, Frank, they are the same thing, he said. He finally looked at me. His lips curled into a pitying smirk, the kind a professor gives a slow student. Relationships are currency. Leverage, optics are assets. He leaned forward, invading my space, smelling of expensive cologne and ambition. But I wouldn't expect a guy who spent his life in a tool shed to understand the nuances of high-level networking. You build the walls, Frank. We decide what hangs on them. The room went quiet. The insult hung in the air like smoke, choking out the lavender. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest. It wasn't anger. Not yet. Anger is a flash fire. This was the slow burn of a coal seam. It was the warning light on a dashboard. Check engine. Structural integrity compromised. He thinks I'm a fool, I thought. He thinks I'm just a wallet with a pulse, a beast of burden to carry his ambitions up the hill. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. That hurt more than the insult. I reached for my checkbook. It was a simple, plastic-covered book from a local credit union, worn at the edges. Kevin watched me write. His eyes were greedy, predatory. They tracked the pen like a shark tracking a wounded seal. He didn't blink. Fine, I said, my voice flat. The oysters. The imported champagne. The orchestra. The caliber you require. Kevin snatched the check the moment I signed it. He didn't wait for the ink to dry. Great, he said, tucking it into his pocket without even looking at the amount, as if the money was simply his due. He stood up, checking his phone immediately. The transaction was complete. The human element was no longer required. Oh, and Frank? He paused at the glass door, looking me up and down with undisguised distaste. For the rehearsal dinner, try to wear something less flannel. He gestured to my shirt, the comfortable plaid I'd worn for 20 years. My father is the CEO of Stratton Logistics. He's a titan of industry. A visionary. Smirked, checking his reflection in the glass door, adjusting his tie. Let's try to look the part of the family he's merging with, shall we? Try not to look like the help. I stared at him. I remember his face. I memorized the way the light hit his arrogance. I'll wear a suit. Kevin, I said. Don't worry about me. Good man. He didn't shake my hand. He didn't say thank you. I have to run. Strategy meeting with the heavy hitters. Sarah, you can catch a ride with your dad. My Porsche's getting detailed. Can't have a speck of dust on the image. He walked out. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully. He didn't kiss her goodbye. He didn't even touch her shoulder. He left her there, like a coat he didn't need for the moment. The door chimes faded, leaving a silence that felt heavy. Sarah stared at the empty space where her fiancé had been. She touched her engagement ring, twisting it nervously, around and around. A nervous tick. He's just stressed, she whispered. Lies. She always looked down when she lied. She learned that from her mother. Let's go, Sarah, I said gently, standing up. My knees popped. I'll take you home. We walked out to my truck. It's a 2016 Ford F-150. It's not pretty. It's dented on the passenger side from a falling steel beam 3 years ago. A near miss that taught me to check my rigging twice. I never fixed it. It reminds me to be careful. The engine hummed a song I knew by heart, a deep, throaty diesel rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. The cab smelled like old coffee, sawdust, and hard work. It smelled like safety. We drove for 10 minutes in silence. The city lights blurred past the window, streaks of red and white. He loves me, Dad, Sarah said quietly. She was staring out the window at the passing suburbs, her breath fogging the glass. Her voice sounded like she was trying to convince herself. Not me. I didn't ask, I said, keeping my eyes on the road. I know what you're thinking, she said, turning to me. The streetlights washed over her face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. You think he's arrogant? You think he's using me? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The leather creaked. I think he looks at my bank account more than he looks at your face, I said. It was harsh, but I don't do soft lies. I'd go in for it. A soft lie causes a collapse. He's under a lot of pressure, she defended him. But her voice was thin. It sounded like glass about to crack under thermal shock. His family, Richard, his dad, he's terrifying. He demands perfection, total submission. She picked at a loose thread on her jeans. Unraveling. Kevin is just trying to survive him. He's terrified of failing. He feels like he's drowning. I glanced at her. And what about you? I asked softly. Are you surviving, Sarah? She didn't answer. She just traced the pattern on the seat with her finger. She looked tired, not physically tired. Soul tired. That silence cut deeper than any word she could have spoken. I dropped her off at the townhouse I had bought for them. A starter home, Kevin had called it, sneering at the 3 bedrooms and marble countertops. Thanks, Dad, she said. She hesitated at the door. She looked back at the truck, then at the house. Call me if you need me, I said. For anything, day or night. She nodded, but she didn't smile. She walked up the path. The house looked perfect. The lawn was manicured, but as she unlocked the door, she hesitated. Just for a second, like she didn't want to go inside, like she was walking into a cell. I watched until the door closed and the lock clicked. Then I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going home. I drove to the industrial park on the south side of the city. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows over the steel skeletons of new buildings. This was my world. Steel, concrete, truth, materials that didn't lie, materials that held the weight you put on them or broke if you didn't respect them. I swiped my keycard at the gate of O'Connell Infrastructure. The heavy iron gate rolled back with a reassuring clank, clank, clank. The night guard, Mike, stepped out of his booth. He was holding a thermos of coffee. Evening, Mr. O'Connell, Mike called out, waving. Thought you were retired? Enjoying the good life? I am, Mike, I said, rolling down the window. The evening air was cool, smelling of ozone and wet cement. Just checking the foundation. Old habits, Mike grinned. Once a boss, always a boss. Good to see you, Frank. I parked in my old spot. It was still reserved. No one else dared to park there. Not even David, the bright young CEO I had handpicked to take over. I went up to the executive suite. The office was quiet. The staff had gone home. The only light came from the emergency exit signs and the glow of the city outside. I sat at the desk that used to be mine. It was now occupied by David's sleek laptop and modern art. but the chair still felt like mine. I needed to know. I logged into the terminal. The screen cast a blue pallor over my face. Kevin treated his father like a god. He spoke of Stratton Logistics like it was the Roman Empire. I wanted to see if the statue was made of gold or just painted plaster. Structural engineers look for cracks. That's what we do. We look for the hairline fractures that precede the catastrophe. I picked up the phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Sam, I said when he answered. Sam ran a private investigation firm. We grew up together on the same block. We fought in the same bars. He knew where all the bodies were buried in this city, because he usually held the shovel. Frank, Sam's voice was raspy, cursed. I could hear the flick of a lighter in the background. To what do I owe the pleasure? You finally bored of fishing? Or did the roof cave in somewhere? I need a deep dive, Sam, I said. My voice was low, echoing in the empty office. Name, the Montgomery family. Stratton Logistics, Richard. Nancy and the son, Kevin. The in-laws. Sam chuckled. A dry sound like leaves scraping pavement. Getting cold feet, or just doing your due diligence? I want financials, I said, ignoring the joke. I stared at the blinking cursor on the screen. I want legal records. I want the skeletons in the closet. I want to know what they eat for breakfast, who they owe money to, and which offshore accounts they're hiding. Frank, that's a lot of digging. I want to know if they are solvent, I said. Something smells rotten, Sam, like dry rot under fresh paint. Give me 24 hours, Sam said. The humor was gone from his voice. You have 12, I said. The wedding is in 5 days. I need to know what I'm walking my daughter into. 12 it is. I'll call you. I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark for a long time, watching the lights of the city. I looked at my hands again. The scars were invisible in the dim light, but I could still feel the ache. The hammer was heavy, but I was ready to swing it. The next day, the humiliation began in earnest. It started with a phone call at 10-hour a.m. Sarah's voice was tight, pitched high with a panic that didn't match the problem. The kitchen sink. It's backing up. Brown water. It smells terrible. Call a plumber, Sarah, I said, looking at the fishing rod I was respooling in. My garage, I was supposed to be retired. I was supposed to be thinking about trout, not you, Benz. I can't, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Kevin says we can't afford the call-out fee right now until the transfer's clear, and he's too busy to deal with it. Too busy. The phrase hung there. Too busy to ensure his fiancée had clean water, but not too busy to micromanage the font on the wedding invitations. I'm on my way, I said. I drove over to the townhouse. It was a cloudy day, the sky the color of a bruised plum. The house looked pristine from the street. White trim, manicured hedges. But houses are like people. The rot always starts on the inside, where the sun doesn't reach. I walked in with my toolbox. It's a heavy red steel box, dented and scratched, older than Kevin. It clanked against the marble foyer floor. Kevin wasn't in the living room. Sarah was in the kitchen, looking at the sink with horror. The smell of stagnant grease and decay filled the expensive air. It's disgusting, she said, stepping back. It's just plumbing, Sarah, I said, setting the box down. Pipes get clogged. Pressure builds. Things burst. It's physics. I opened the cabinet doors under the island sink. I lay on my back, sliding my torso into the dark, cramped space. It smelled of mildew and wet wood. I clicked on my heavy flashlight. The trap was old PVC, poorly installed. Cheap flip, I thought. Looked good on the surface, garbage underneath. Just like the owner, I began to work. My hands, large and clumsy-looking, moved with practiced grace in the tight space. I loosened the nut. Dark water dripped onto my cheek. I wiped it away with a rag and kept turning. 10 minutes later, I heard the front door open. Mom, stop worrying, Kevin's voice floated into the kitchen. He was loud, projecting his voice as if he were on a stage. He walked right past the kitchen island. He couldn't see me. I was deep in the cabinet, my legs hidden by the island's overhang. I was invisible to men like Kevin. People who fix things are always invisible. Yeah, I know the deadline is coming, Kevin said into his phone. His voice changed. The smooth, practiced baritone dropped into a frantic, hushed hiss. I have it under control. The funds they're almost accessible. I froze. My hand gripped the pipe wrench. The metal was cold against my palm. He's here right now, Kevin laughed. It was a cruel, jarring sound. Yeah, the father. Under the sink. Literally. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. It's pathetic, honestly. Kevin continued. The guy is a millionaire. On paper, right? But he owns the infrastructure of half the state. But he lives like a janitor. He drives a truck that belongs in a scrapyard. It's embarrassing to have him in the driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't the insult that made my blood run cold. I've been called a grease monkey by men in suits my whole life. Insults are wind. It was what came next. But don't worry, Kevin lowered his voice further. I had to hold my breath to hear him over the dripping water. Once the deed is transferred, once we sign the papers at the wedding, we'll leverage the property immediately. Leverage. The word echoed in the dark cabinet. I can use the equity to cover the margin call, Kevin whispered. I'll shift the debt onto the house, pay off the guys in AC, and then we refinance before the old man notices. Margin call. My blood turned to ice. I stopped breathing. The wrench felt heavy, like a weapon. People with healthy finances don't have margin calls. That isn't business talk. That isn't strategy. That's stock market talk. That's gambling talk. That means you bet money you didn't have borrowed money, and the market moved against you. Now the bank, or the broker, wants their money back. Fast. Or they liquidate everything you own. I know, Kevin said, pacing the living room now. I could hear his expensive leather shoes squeaking on the hardwood. Just a few more days. I have to play nice with the old pig. Until the wedding. I have to smile and eat his pot roast, and pretend I care about his hard work stories. The old pig. The insult stung, sharp and sudden, like a hornet sting. It wasn't just an insult to me. It was an insult to my life. To the 40 years of frozen mornings, of missed birthdays because I was pouring concrete, of the back surgeries and the arthritis. He saw my sacrifice as filth, but the margin call terrified me. This wasn't just about disrespect. This was about survival. He wasn't marrying Sarah. He was harvesting her. I have to go, Kevin said. He's coming out. I can hear the wrench. He hung up. I lay there for a moment, in the dark. I closed my eyes. I pictured Sarah's face. He thinks I'm a fool. I thought. He thinks I'm just a wallet with a pulse, a resource to be mined and discarded. I slid out from under the sink. My joints popped. I stood up, wiping my grease-stained hands on a rag. I took my time. I wanted him to see the grease. I wanted him to see the dirt. I walked into the living room. Kevin jumped. He nearly dropped his phone. He spun around, his face pale. Frank, Jesus, he yelled, clutching his chest. You sneak around like a cat. I didn't know you were finished. Disposal is fixed, I said. My voice was steady, low, but inside, a fire was lighting. It was the blue flame of an acetylene torch, hot, focused, and capable of cutting through steel. Great, thanks. He tried to smile. It wavered at the corners. He looked at my hands with a flicker of disgust. Who were you talking to? I asked. I stared him right in the eyes. I looked for the soul, but all I saw was panic. Just my mother, he said quickly. Too quickly, planning the seating chart. Boring stuff. You know how she is. Margin calls aren't usually part of seating charts, I said. The air left the room. His eyes widened. Just a fraction. But I saw it. It was the look of a man who realizes the safety harness has snapped. Oh, that, he laughed nervously. He put his phone in his pocket, hiding the evidence. Just business talk. Discussing some aggressive investments for the portfolio. You know how volatile the market is right now? High risk, high reward. I do, I said. I took a step closer, towered over him. Be careful, Kevin. The market bites, and it doesn't let go. I know what I'm doing, Frank, he snapped, regaining his arrogance. It was his shield. I don't need advice from a guy who keeps his money in a credit union and thinks a bond is something you use to glue wood. He brushed past me. I have to shower. We have the tasting at 5. He had no idea who he was talking to. He thought he was talking to a laborer. He didn't know he was talking to the demolition expert. I packed my tools. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from a rage so cold it burned. I left the house. Sarah was in the garden, trying to prune a rose bush. She looked lost. I wanted to grab her, put her in the truck, and drive until we hit the ocean. But she wouldn't come. Not yet. She needed to see the monster herself. As I walked to my truck, I saw a car parked across the street. It was a black sedan, tinted windows, engine idling. I know this neighborhood. I built the roads here. I know Mrs. Higgins, who walks her poodle at 11 a.m. I know the mailman. That car didn't belong. It sat still like a predator waiting in the tall grass. I walked past it on my way to the truck. I didn't look away. I glanced at the side mirror. The window was down an inch. Smoke curled out. A man was sitting inside. He was wearing a cheap suit and sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. He had a scar running down his cheek, jagged and white. He was watching the townhouse. He was watching Kevin's front door. He saw me looking. He didn't look away. He took a drag of his cigarette and stared right through me. This wasn't a banker. This wasn't an investor. This wasn't the SEC. This was a shark. This was Atlantic City trouble. This was break your legs trouble. I got in my truck. I locked the doors. Kevin wasn't just broke. He was hunted, and he was planning to use my daughter as a human shield. I drove 3 blocks, pulled over, and called Sam. Tell me you have something, I said. Don't tell me I'm crazy. Frank, pull over, Sam said. His voice was grim. I am pulled over. You sitting down? Give it to me, Sam. All of it. It's a house of cards, Frank. A big, ugly, rotting house of cards held together by spit and lies. I closed my eyes. Start with the father. Richard Montgomery, Sam read from a report. I could hear paper shuffling. Stratton Logistics is bleeding. They lost their 3 biggest contracts in Asia last month due to compliance issues, which is corporate speak for bribery. They are hemorrhaging cash. $5 million a month. How bad is the hole? Prison bad. Richard has been cooking the books to hide the losses from the board for 2 years. He's moving money between shell companies to make it look like profit. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, Frank. And the music stopped playing. And the son? Kevin? Gambling debt? Sam said. Heavy. 6 figures. He plays high-stakes poker in Atlantic City. And he's bad at it. He chases losses. I gripped the phone. How much? He owes $450,000 to a syndicate in Jersey, and he owes another $50,000 to some local loan sharks. The guy in the black sedan? That's probably their collection agent. He's counting on this wedding, I whispered. He's counting on your assets, Sam corrected. He's been telling his creditors for months that he's marrying into the O'Connell fortune. He promised them a payout the week after the honeymoon. It wasn't love, I said. The realization hit me in the chest like a swinging beam. It was a heist. No, Sam said. It was a rescue mission for them. They are drowning, Frank, and you are the life raft. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until the leather creaked and groaned. They weren't just disrespecting me. They weren't just snobs. They were selling my daughter to pay for their sins. They were going to strip her of her dignity, her future, and her safety, just to keep their country club membership for another year. There's more, Sam said. Hit me. Stratton is looking for a buyer. A desperate last-minute buyout to save Richard from federal prison. They've been shopping the company around quietly. Distressed asset sale. They need a savior. A cold, sharp thought entered my mind. It was geometric, precise. It was the kind of strategic thought that had helped me destroy my competition for 30 years. I didn't just want to stop the wedding. I wanted to dismantle the threat. Sam, I said, call David. Your CEO? Yes. Tell him to convene an emergency board meeting. Tonight. In the war room. Why? You're retired. I'm unretiring for 24 hours. What are you going to do, Frank? I looked in the rearview mirror, back toward the townhouse where my daughter was trying to prune roses in a garden she didn't own. I want to buy Stratton Logistics. Sam was silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing. You want to buy a sinking ship, Frank? Why? It's toxic. It's worthless. No, I said, putting the truck in gear. The engine roared. I'm not buying the company for the profit. Then why? I want to buy the captain. I drove to O'Connell Infrastructure. The sun was down now. The office lights were blazing. David was waiting for me in the boardroom. He looked tired. His tie loosened. The table was covered in spreadsheets. Sam had sent over. You're serious? David asked, looking at me like I had lost my mind. Frank, look at these numbers. This company is radioactive. The debt is massive. The liabilities are a nightmare. The debt is leverage, I said, walking to the window. I looked out over the city. I helped build. What's the asking price? They are desperate, David said, tapping a pen on the table. They are asking for $50 million. But honestly, it's worth zero. Less than zero. If we buy it, we inherit the lawsuits. Offer them 20, I said. Cash. Immediate close. No due diligence. David dropped his pen. It clattered loudly on the mahogany. No due diligence? Frank, that's suicide. That's against every protocol we have. I turned to him. My face was set in stone. I know what I'm buying, David, I said. I've done the due diligence. I'm not buying the trucks. I'm not buying the warehouses. What are you buying then? Control, I said. I want the debt notes. I want the mortgage on their headquarters. I want the personal guarantees Richard signed. They'll never accept 20. It's an insult. They will, I said. If they know the alternative is jail. Richard is terrified of prison. He's soft. He'll take the lifeboat even if it has holes in it. I leaned over the table. Do it through a shell company, I instructed. Use Orion Holdings. I don't want them to know it's me. Not yet. When do you want to close? Friday, I said. The morning of the wedding. David looked at me. He saw something in my eyes he hadn't seen in years. The old Frank, the Frank who fought the mob for concrete contracts in the 80s. All right, David said quietly. I'll make the call. I walked out of the office. The game had changed. They thought I was the old pig. They were about to find out that pigs are smart, strong, and when you corner them, they eat bone and all. The Meet the Parents dinner was held 2 nights later at the Obsidian. It was the kind of restaurant that didn't put prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you were in the wrong zip code. The walls were jagged slate, the lighting was dim and moody, and the air conditioner was set to a temperature that required a cashmere sweater. It was a place designed to make you feel cool, detached, and superior. I walked in. I was wearing my Navy suit. It was a good suit, bought for funerals and board meetings. I had even polished my shoes, the smell of wax reminding me of Sunday mornings before church. But as I stepped onto the polished concrete floor, I felt heavy, clumsy. Compared to the clientele, men in Italian silk and women who looked like they lived on champagne and gossip, I looked like a boulder in a jewelry store. The hostess looked at me with a practiced neutrality that bordered on disdain. O'Connell, I said. Ah, yes. The Montgomery party is waiting. The Montgomery party, not the O'Connell-Montgomery party. Just them. We were just guests at our own execution. She led me through the maze of tables. I saw Kevin first. He was waving me over, his arms stiff, his smile tight. He was sitting at a round corner table with his parents, Richard and Nancy. Sarah was there too. She was sitting between Kevin and his mother, looking like a prisoner between 2 wardens. Richard Montgomery was a large man, but not in the way I was. My size came from muscle and bone density built by lifting steel. Richard's size was soft, rich food, expensive scotch, and sedentary power. He took up space as if he owned the very air around him. He had a flushed, florid face, and wet eyes that scanned everything for value. Nancy was the opposite. She was thin, sharp, and angular. She was covered in jewelry, gold, diamonds, platinum, that rattled when she moved. She looked like she was armored against the world. I bid Matee, Richard, Atha. Their father, Richard said. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer a hand. He just gestured to the empty chair across from him. Frank, is it? It is, I said. I extended my hand. Richard looked at it for a second, then took it. His grip was limp, damp. It was like holding a dead fish wrapped in silk. He pulled his hand away quickly, wiping it subtly on his napkin. Kevin tells us you were in construction, Nancy asked. She said the word construction the way one might say sewage treatment. She wrinkled her nose slightly, a micro-expression of distaste. Infrastructure, I corrected, sitting down. The chair was low, uncomfortable. Roads, bridges, tunnels, the things that keep the city from collapsing. Right. Bricks and mortar, Richard laughed. It was a dismissive, wheezing sound. I deal in logistics, strategy, the movement of capital, and goods across international borders. It's a higher plane of commerce, you understand. Less dirt, more philosophy. He smirked, picking up his wine glass. Someone has to build the roads you drive your trucks on, Richard, I said calmly. Philosophy doesn't bear weight. The table went quiet for a beat. Richard's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected the laborer to speak back. Touche, Richard smirked, recovering his mask. Sit down, Frank. Relax. Try the wine. It's a 210 Bordeaux. Probably a bit complex for a beer drinker. It has notes of currant and tobacco, but give it a try. Expand your palate. I poured a glass of water from the crystal carafe. I'm fine with water, I said. I like to keep a clear head. I watched them. I didn't eat. I just watched. I watched how they systematically dismantled my daughter. Sarah was trying to speak. She had a binder on her lap, her wedding ideas. I was thinking for the flowers, she started. Opening the binder. Nancy knows best, dear Richard interrupted her. Not even looking at her. He was signaling the waiter for more bread. Nancy has planned galas for senators. She did the governor's ball last year. Let the professionals handle the aesthetics. Sarah closed her mouth. She looked down at her empty plate. But I really wanted peonies, Sarah whispered. Peonies are peasant flowers, Nancy said, taking a sip of wine. They wilt too fast. We're doing orchids. White orchids. They photograph better. We want the photos to be timeless, Kevin added, patting Sarah's hand patronizingly. For the press release. Press release? I asked. For the business journals, Kevin said. Montgomery O'Connell merger. It's good for stock confidence. I looked at Kevin. He wasn't looking at Sarah with love. He was looking at her like she was a prop, a mannequin to drape his ambition over. We are so happy Kevin found Sarah, Nancy said, her eyes cold and assessing. She's very grounded. Kevin needs a grounded wife. Someone to handle the domestic side while he conquers the world, Richard added, tearing a piece of bread violently. Behind every great man and all that. Sarah has a master's degree in civil engineering, I said. My voice was a little louder this time, the rumble of a distant thunder. She graduated top of her class. She designed the drainage system for the new stadium. Cute, Richard said. I froze. Cute? Let's be real, Frank. Richard leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive wine and decay. Kevin is the star here. He's taking over Stratton one day. We need a wife who supports the legacy, who hosts the dinners, who raises the heirs. Not a competitor. We don't need another chief. We need an Indian. I swallowed hard. The urge to flip the heavy table was rising in my throat. I gripped the linen napkin in my lap until my knuckles cracked. Hold it, Frank. Wait for the concrete to set. Then the cracks in their facade began to show physically. A woman walked up to the table. She didn't look like a diner. She looked exhausted, her hair fraying, her eyes wide with panic. She was holding a clipboard. Mr. Montgomery, she said. Kevin jumped. Not now, Elena. We are eating. This was Elena, the wedding planner. The woman from the boutique. I can't wait, Kevin, Elena said, her voice shaking. She looked at Richard, then back to Kevin. I need a signature and a cashier's check. Tonight, we discussed this, Kevin snapped. The checks, they bounced, Kevin, Elena said. She said it loud enough for the next table to hear. All of them. The florist, the caterer, the venue, insufficient funds. The table went silent. The silence was absolute. Kevin turned red, a blotchy, ugly crimson. That's a bank error, he hissed. I told you. I transferred the funds from the offshore holdings. It takes 48 hours. They need confirmation tonight, or they walk, Elena said. Tears were welling in her eyes. I've already paid the deposits out of my own pocket, Kevin. I can't lose this money. She looked desperate. She looked like a woman who was about to lose her business because of these people. I'll handle it, Kevin said, standing up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Excuse me. He grabbed Elena by the elbow, roughly, too roughly. He steered her away from the table, toward the lobby. I watched them go. I saw the way he loomed over her. Bullying, threatening, using size to intimidate. Bank errors, Richard laughed, waving his hand breezily. The international banking system is a dinosaur. So slow, hard to move millions these days without red tape. Or the account is empty, I said. Richard's smile froze. It didn't disappear. It just turned into a rictus of hate. Excuse me? Nothing, I said, taking a sip of my water. Just an observation. Gravity applies to money, too. Kevin came back 5 minutes later. He looked sweaty. His tie was slightly crooked. Sordid, he said, sitting down. Incompetent staff. Hard to find good help, right? Frank, you know all about laborers, always trying to squeeze an extra dime. The Glumners are the only honest people I know, I said. They don't bounce checks. Kevin rolled his eyes. Whatever. Then the trap was sprung. We have the paperwork, Richard said. The pleasantries were over. He reached into his leather briefcase and slid a blue folder across the table. It stopped in front of Sarah. Standard prenup, Richard said. To protect the Stratton assets. Just a formality. Lawyers, you know. I reached out and took the folder before Sarah could touch it. I'll read it, I said. It's full of legalese, Frank. Kevin sneered. You might need a dictionary. I've negotiated union contracts for 40 years, Kevin. I can read. I put on my reading glasses. I opened the folder. I scanned the pages. I didn't need a law degree to see the venom on the page. It was a reverse prenup. Usually a prenup protects what you bring into the marriage. This was a robbery. It waived Sarah's rights to everything. No alimony, no claim on property acquired during the marriage. But Clause 4 made my blood boil. Clause 4, assignment of future assets. In the event of inheritance, windfall, or acquisition of assets by the spouse, Sarah said assets shall be immediately placed into the joint trust administered solely by the primary Kevin. They weren't protecting themselves from her. They were positioning themselves to swallow my company the day I died. We won't be signing this, I said. I closed the folder. I didn't slide it back. I kept it under my hand. Excuse me? Kevin snapped. It's non-negotiable. It's company policy for all Montgomery partners. Then there's no wedding, I said. I looked directly at Kevin. I let the old pig drop away. I let the CEO out. You want my daughter? You take her as she is. You don't get a claim on my company. You don't get a claim on my death benefits. You get a wife? Not a lottery ticket. Richard laughed nervously. He looked at Nancy. Nancy looked furious. Frank, don't be dramatic, Richard said, his voice tightening. It's just standard procedure. We can discuss the wording later, after the ceremony. No, Sarah spoke up. Everyone looked at her. She was trembling, but her head was up. Dad is right, she said softly. I'm not signing that. I read it, Kevin. It says you control my inheritance. Kevin turned on her. His eyes were cold, dead things. Babe, don't be stupid, he hissed. This is for us, for our future. We pool our resources. That's how dynasties are built. It doesn't look like it's for me, Sarah said. It looks like I'm an employee. We'll talk about this at home, Kevin said. His tone was a threat, a promise of an argument she wouldn't win. You're being emotional, just like your father. My fist clenched under the table. I wanted to break his jaw. I wanted to shatter his perfect teeth. But not here, not yet. I needed the final piece. I need to use the restroom, I said. I stood up. Excuse me. I walked away from the table. I needed to breathe. If I stayed there, I was going to do something that would get me arrested before I could destroy them properly. I walked into the restroom. There was a cavern of black marble and chrome. It echoed. I walked to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror and calmed down, Frank. Stick to the plan. You are the structural engineer. You don't swing the wrecking ball until the charges are set. The door opened. I stepped into the alcove near the towel dispenser, obscured by a decorative partition. Kevin and Richard walked in. They didn't check the stall. They assumed they were alone. They were the main characters. Everyone else was just scenery. "He's a stone wall," Kevin complained. His voice echoed off the tile. "He's stubborn as a mule. He won't sign the house deed over until the wedding day," Kevin continued, pacing. I tried to pressure him. "He's too stupid to understand the urgency." "Just get it done, Kevin," Richard hissed. The smooth titan of industry voice was gone. This was the voice of a cornered rat. "The auditors are coming on Monday," Richard said. "Do you hear me? Monday. If I don't have that capital injection, if I can't show them the O'Connell assets on our balance sheet, we are finished. I'm going to jail, Kevin." "I know," Kevin shouted. "Stop pressuring me. I need his money, Kevin. I need to raid his company. We strip it. We pay the debts. And we survive." "I know," Kevin said, exhaling sharply. "God, he's such an embarrassment. Did you see his shoes? Work boots with a suit? He looks like a clown. He's a means to an end," Richard said cold. "This is just the old pig we have to put up with until the check clears. Then we cut him loose. We divorce the girl in 2 years. Keep the assets, and you find someone from a real family. The old pig. Real family." I stood in the shadows. I stopped breathing. My reflection in the mirror looked calm, but my eyes were burning with a cold nuclear fire. "Fix it, Kevin," Richard said. "Make her sign. Threaten to leave her. She's pathetic. She'll fold. She's terrified of being alone." They washed their hands quickly, barely touching the water, and left. I waited for a full minute. I dried my hands. I adjusted my tie. I pulled out my phone. A text message from David had arrived 1 minute ago. "Deal is closed. Papers signed. Funds transferred via Orion Holdings. We own Stratton Logistics 100%. You're the chairman. Do you want to announce?" I stared at the screen. I owned them. I owned the debt they were trying to hide. I owned the building they worked in. I owned the very chairs they were sitting on right now. I typed back. "Not yet. Bring the paperwork to the wedding. And bring the police. I want the FBI for the fraud." David replied instantly. "Understood. Security team is on standby." I put the phone in my pocket. It felt like a detonator. I walked back out into the dining room. Richard was smiling, swirling his wine. Kevin was whispering angrily to Sarah. I sat down. "Everything all right, Frank?" Richard asked. Smugly. "You look a bit pale. Perhaps the food is too rich for you." I picked up my water glass. I looked Richard dead in the eye. "No, Richard," I said. "I've never felt better. The food is delicious. I think I'll stay for dessert." I smiled. A real smile. It was the smile of the wolf who just realized the sheep locked themselves in the pen with him. The next morning, 2 days before the wedding, I introduced the third player, Uncle Tommy. Tommy wasn't my uncle by blood. He was my foreman for 20 years. He was the guy who ran the crews when I was in the office. He was 70 now, but he was built like a vending machine made of granite. His hands were the size of shovels, and his nose had been broken so many times it looked like a zigzag on a map. I met him at the Girder, a diner near the shipyard, where the coffee tasted like battery acid and the waitresses didn't smile. "Tommy," I said, sliding into the booth. The vinyl seat was cracked, revealing yellow foam. Tommy looked up from his eggs. "Frank, you look like you're about to pour concrete over a body." "Close," I said. "I need a favor. A big one. Name it. I need you to be security at the wedding. Not the official security. I need you to be my security." Tommy chewed slowly. "You expecting a riot?" "I'm expecting an arrest," I said. "And I'm expecting trouble from the groom's creditors." I leaned in. "Kevin, the groom, he owes money. Dad money. There's a guy in a black sedan watching the house. Scar on his cheek. Looks like Jersey Syndicate." Tommy's face went serious. The jovial retiree vanished. The foreman who used to break up fights on the ironworks appeared. Loan sharks at a wedding. Tommy asked, "That's messy, Frank." "Stray bullets." "Exactly. If they try anything, if they try to collect, stop them." "Stop them how?" "However you have to," I said. "I want David and the feds to have a clear path to the stage. I don't want the sharks getting in the way. Consider it done, boss, Tommy said, wiping his mouth. I'll bring the boys. The old crew will wear suits, will look civilized. Just don't hit anyone unless they move first. Tommy cracked his knuckles. It sounded like a gunshot. I never swing first, Frank. You know that. I just swing last. The week dragged on. The air was thick with humidity and lies. I watched Sarah fade. She lost weight. Her cheekbones became sharp. Her eyes hollow. She stopped laughing. She moved through the wedding preparations, like a ghost haunting her own life. Every time I saw Kevin, he was sweeter than pie. Hey, Frank. Great day, isn't it? Fake? Plastic. He was vibrating with the anticipation of the payday. But there was one more secret to uncover. Sam had the financials, but I needed the intent. I needed the witness. 2 nights before the wedding, I received a text from an unknown number. Grocery store on 5th. Road G. Midnight. Come alone. We drove my truck. It was raining, a hard, cold rain that slicked the asphalt. I parked in the back of the lot, away from the lights. A woman approached me from the shadows of a cart return. She was wearing a trench coat, soaked through with rain. She looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. Mr. O'Connell? Yes. I rolled down the window just an inch. I'm Lydia, she said. Her voice was trembling. I used to be the head accountant at Stratton. Richard fired me 6 months ago when I refused to certify the quarterly earnings, she said. Water dripped from her nose. He wanted me to capitalize expenses that didn't exist. He wanted me to invent assets. I heard rumors that I was buying in. She let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. You aren't buying in, Mr. O'Connell. You're the sacrifice. They call you the golden parachute in the internal emails. I know, I said. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small silver USB drive. This is the real ledger, she said. Not the one they show the banks. Not the one they showed your lawyers. Why are you giving me this? Because Richard Montgomery ruined my life, she said, her eyes hard and wet. He blamed the losses on me to the board. He told them I was incompetent. He blacklisted me. I haven't worked in 6 months. I'm losing my house. She handed me the drive. It felt cold. Bury him, she whispered. Bury him so deep he never sees the sun. I took the drive. Go home, Lydia, I said. Watch the news on Sunday, and check your bank account on Monday. I pay for information. She nodded and vanished into the rain. I sat there for a moment. The rain drummed on the roof of the truck. Tap, tap. Like a hammer driving a nail. I had the gun. Now I had the bullets. The wedding day. The venue was the Grand Estate, a sprawling mansion on the cliffs, overlooking the river. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It was a lie constructed of white linen and imported flowers. I stood in the ready room, adjusting my tie. It felt like a noose. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a father of the bride. I saw a demolition expert checking the timer. I walked Sarah down the aisle. The grass was soft. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon. The guests turned to look. Sarah was shaking. I could feel the tremors through her arm. Dad, she whispered. I'm scared. I stopped right there in the middle of the aisle. The music faltered. People whispered. You don't have to do this, I said, low and urgent. We can turn around, right now. I have the truck out front. We can go to the diner. We can go home. She looked up at me. Her eyes were swimming. She looked at Kevin at the altar. He was smiling. He looked perfect in his tuxedo, but his eyes were tapping his watch. Hurry up. Time is money. I can't, she said, a tear slipping down her cheek. It's too late. The deposits, the guests. The hell with the guests, I said. I love him, Dad, she lied. Or maybe she believed it. Maybe she was in love with the idea of him. I have to try. Maybe once we're married, the pressure will stop. He'll be happy. She was brave, braver than me. She still believed people could be fixed. I knew some structures were condemned from the start. Okay, I said. I'm with you. Every step. We reached the altar. Kevin took her hand like he was claiming a prize at a carnival. He didn't look at me. He looked over my shoulder at the crowd, assessing the net worth of the room. The ceremony was a blur. Do you take? I do. in sickness and in health. Words. Just words. Structural integrity is proven in the storm, not on the blueprints. The reception began. The ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. It was filled with 300 people. The room was segregated, though no one said it aloud. On the left, my friends. The carpenters with calloused hands in rented suits. The welders who looked uncomfortable in ties. The people who built the city. On the right, the elite. The sharks. The vultures Richard had invited. Men with tans in November and women who didn't eat. I sat at the head table. I was silent. I watched them drink the champagne I paid for. I watched them eat the oysters I paid for. I saw Uncle Tommy by the door. He was leaning against the wall, looking like a bouncer at a dive bar. He caught my eye. He gave a subtle nod. He had spotted Marcus. The loan shark was in the back, near the kitchen doors. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit poorly. He was scanning the room, his eyes locked on Kevin. Tommy moved closer to him, casually, blocking his line of sight. Richard stood up to give the toast. He held a microphone in one hand and a glass of gin in the other. He was drunk. Not stumbling drunk, but power drunk. The kind of drunk that removes the filter between the brain and the mouth. "Welcome," he bellowed. Feedback squealed. "Welcome, everyone. What a night. To my son, Kevin, and to Sarah." Applause. Polite, rippling applause. "We are building a dynasty tonight," Richard shouted, sweeping his arm across the room. "The Stratton legacy grows. We are merging the old with the new." He paused for dramatic effect. "And we have to thank Frank." He pointed at me. The spotlight swung around, blinding me. I didn't blink. I sat like a stone gargoyle. "Frank paid for the party," Richard laughed. "Let's hear it for Frank." The applause was thinner this time. Confused. "You know," Richard continued, leaning on the podium, "when Kevin first introduced me to him, I saw the truck. I saw the flannel shirts, the dirt under the fingernails, and I thought, my God, this is the old pig we have to put up with." The room went dead silent. The air conditioner hummed. A fork clinked against a plate. Sarah gasped. She looked at Kevin. He called him a pig. Kevin laughed, nervously. He grabbed her hand, squeezing it hard. "It's a roast, babe. It's a joke. Laugh. Don't make a scene." "It's not funny," Sarah whispered. "But seriously," Richard continued, ignoring the tension, reveling in his cruelty. "Frank is a good worker. He's the muscle. We are the brains. That's the partnership. He lifts the heavy things, and we tell him where to put them. That is the natural order of the world." He raised his glass. "To the old pig, may his wallet always be open." Some of the wealthy guests chuckled. My friends on the left side of the room started to stand up. I saw fists clenching. "Sit down, Richard," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I spoke with the voice I used to command 1,000 men on a job site over the roar of pile drivers. It was a voice that vibrated in the chest. "Oh, look," Kevin yelled, standing up. "The pig speaks. What are you going to do, Frank? Fix the microphone? Go change a light bulb?" "No," I said. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I smoothed my tie. I walked to the nair of the stage. I took the microphone from Richard's hand. He was too stunned to stop me. "You called me a pig," I said, my voice echoing through the massive hall. "And you called my family muscle." "It's the truth." Richard sneered, trying to regain control. "You're a laborer, Frank. You serve us. You exist to serve people of vision." "Is that so?" I asked. I looked at the back of the room. The double doors. David. The doors swung open. David walked in. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 4 uniformed police officers. And 2 men in suits. FBI. The room gasped. A collective intake of breath. "Who is that?" Nancy shrieked, dropping her wine glass. It shattered. Red wine, staining her white dress like blood. "That," I said into the microphone, "is the CEO of O'Connell Infrastructure." "So," Kevin shouted, "what does that have to do with us?" "Get out. This is a private event. Tell them, David," I said. David walked up to the stage. He handed me a folder. Yesterday, I said, addressing the room, O'Connell Infrastructure completed the acquisition of a distressed logistics firm, a firm that was insolvent, a firm that was technically bankrupt. Richard went pale. His face turned the color of ash. No, he whispered, that's not possible. A firm that was riddled with fraud, I continued, opening the folder. Stratton Logistics. The name hung in the air. That's impossible, Richard stammered. The buyer was an anonymous holding company. Orion Holdings, that's me, I said. I looked him in the eye. I am Orion. I am the holding company. I am the chairman of the board. I took a step closer. I own Stratton, Richard. I own the building you sit in. I own the debt you are trying to hide. I own the trucks. I own the warehouses. I leaned in close to his sweating face. I am your new boss. The silence was heavy, suffocating, and as your boss, I continued, I have a fiduciary duty to report criminal activity to the authorities. I pointed to the FBI agents. We audited the books this morning, Richard. Thanks to Lydia. Remember her? Richard flinched as if I'd hit him. The embezzlement, the Ponzi scheme, the bribery in Asia, it's all on this drive. I held up the USB stick. The FBI agents moved forward. They moved efficiently, like sharks. Richard Montgomery, one agent said, you are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and grand larceny. They cuffed him right there at the head table. The metal clicked. Nancy, Richard screamed. Call the lawyer. Call the governor. Nancy was backing away, shaking her head. I didn't know. I didn't know anything. Yes, you did, I said. You signed the tax returns, Nancy. You're coming too. An officer gently took Nancy's arm. She screamed. I turned to Kevin. He was standing alone at the altar. He was trembling. He looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. And you, Kevin, I said. Dad, stop, Kevin pleaded. His voice cracked. Not here, please. We can work this out. We're family. We aren't family, I said. And we never were. The gambling debts. I listed. The fraud. I have a problem, Kevin stammered. I need help. I'll go to rehab. It's too late for that, I said, because you did something unforgivable. I pulled a specific paper from the file. You took out loans in Sarah's name, didn't you? Sarah stood up. She looked at Kevin. Her face was white. You what? Babe, no, he's lying, Kevin screamed, backing away. He's just a jealous old man. He hates our love. I have the bank records, I said. He forged your signature last week, Sarah. He took out a $100,000 line of credit against the townhouse I bought you. He used your identity to pay his bookie. Sarah looked at the paper I held out. She saw her name, written, in Kevin's looping, arrogant handwriting. She looked at Kevin. She saw the truth in his panic. She saw the calculation in his eyes. You stole from me, she whispered. Her voice broke. I defended you. I loved you, and you stole from me? I had to, Kevin cried. Marcus was going to break my legs. I did it for us, so I could be alive for the wedding. Sarah took off her ring. It was a diamond, big and flashy. Probably bought with stolen money. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. I hope he breaks them, she said. She threw the ring. It hit Kevin right in the forehead. A small cut opened up. It's over, she said. Kevin snapped. The facade crumbled completely. You ungrateful bitch, he screamed. He lunged for her, his hand raised to strike. You're nothing without me. You're just a construction worker's daughter. He never brought his hand down. Uncle Tommy was there. He moved with a speed that defied his age. He grabbed Kevin's wrist midair. Crack, Tommy didn't say a word. He just twisted. Kevin screamed as he was forced to his knees. The sound was high and pathetic. The police moved in on Kevin. Kevin Montgomery. The officers. We have a warrant for your arrest. Identity theft, bank fraud, and forgery. As they dragged him away, Kevin looked at the back of the room. He was looking for Marcus. I looked too. Marcus was gone. He had seen the cops and vanished into the night. Kevin screamed as they dragged him out the double doors. Frank, help me, Marcus will kill me in prison. He has guys on the inside. Frank, you should have thought of that before you called me a pig, I said into the microphone. The doors closed behind them. The room was silent again. I looked at the crowd. The wealthy friends of Richard were frozen. "The wedding is cancelled," I said. "But the bar is open, and I own the liquor." Then I put the microphone down. The doors clicked shut, swallowing the screams of the man who was supposed to be my son-in-law. For 3 seconds, the room was suspended in a vacuum of silence. It was the kind of silence you hear after a controlled demolition, just before the dust cloud swallows the city block. Then the scuttling began. The guests, the wealthy ones, the business associates of Richard, the women in pearls, who had sneered at my truck, moved with a sudden desperate synchronicity. They didn't run, running would be undignified, but they walked very, very fast. They grabbed their clutches and their wraps. They avoided eye contact. They flowed toward the exits like water seeking a drain. They scurried away like roaches when the kitchen lights turn on, desperate to not be associated with a federal crime scene. "Come on, Harold," one woman hissed, dragging her husband by his sleeve. "Don't look at them, just drive." "The press will be here," a man muttered, checking his phone. "We can't be seen in the background." I watched them go. I stood on the stage, the microphone still warm in my hand. I felt a profound, exhausting contempt. These were the people Kevin wanted to impress. These were the titans of industry, and they had no loyalty. They had no spine. They were just husks wrapped in expensive fabric. Within 2 minutes, half the room was empty. The tables on the right side were abandoned, napkins thrown down like surrender flags, wine glasses still half full. But the left side of the room, my side, they hadn't moved. The carpenters, the welders, the electricians, the truck drivers, the men and women who shower after work, not before, they were still sitting there. Some had stood up when the police arrived, ready to jump in if things got physical, but now they just watched me. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't scared. They were waiting for orders. Uncle Tommy was still by the door, adjusting his cuff. He gave me a thumbs up. A simple, rough gesture that meant more than 1,000 eulogies. David was at the bottom of the stage steps, looking at his phone. "The press is asking for a statement," David said calmly. "Stock price of Stratton is already halted." "Tell them nothing," I said, stepping down. My legs felt heavy. The adrenaline was leaving my system, replaced by the old ache in my knees. "Tell them the trash has been taken out." I walked toward the center of the dance floor. Sarah was standing there alone. She looked like a statue carved from salt. Her wedding dress, a masterpiece of lace and silk that cost more than my first house, suddenly looked like a shroud. She was shivering, though the room was warm. She was staring at the spot where Kevin had been dragged away. Her hands were empty. Her finger was bare. The red mark on her forehead where she had rubbed it in stress was glowing angry against her pale skin. I stopped a few feet away. I was afraid to touch her. I was afraid she would shatter. I had saved her financial future. I had saved her from a lifetime of abuse. But I had also taken a sledgehammer to her heart. I had humiliated her in front of 300 people. "Sarah," I said softly. She didn't answer. She just stared at the empty doorway. He really stole my identity," she whispered. Her voice was hollow. "It wasn't just a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake, honey," I said. "He practiced your signature. I have the papers. He did it to pay off a man who breaks fingers for a living." She let out a sound. It wasn't a cry, it was a sharp intake of breath, like she had been punched in the gut. I took off my suit jacket. It was heavy, warm, and smelled faintly of the sawdust that never really leaves my clothes. I wrapped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said. The words tasted like ash. "I didn't want to ruin your day. I tried to find another way, but they were going to sign those papers today." She turned to look at me. Her mascara was running. Her eyes were red. But behind the tears, the fog was gone. The anxious, darting look she had worn for months, the look of a bird in a cage, had vanished. "You didn't ruin it," she whispered. She reached out and gripped the lapels of my jacket. She pulled me closer. "You saved my life." She leaned her head on my chest. I felt her hot tears soaking through my shirt. I knew she sobbed into my chest. Deep down, I think I knew. I was just too scared to look. I was too scared to be alone. I wrapped my arms around her, my hands, wide and scarred, covered her back. "You are never alone," I said fiercely. "I would burn the world down to save you. I would tear this building apart with my bare hands if I had to." She laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, but it was real. "He called you a pig," she said, shaking her head against my chest. "He called you the old pig. I've been called worse," I smiled, stroking her hair. "Usually by foremen who couldn't read a blueprint. Upside down. Names don't break bones, Sarah. Debt does, lies do." "He really thought you were just a janitor," she said, pulling back to look at me. "He never asked. In 2 years, he never asked you a single question about your company." "He didn't see me," I said. "He only saw what he could take." She took a deep breath. She wiped her face with the sleeve of my jacket. She looked around the empty hall. The waiters were standing by the walls, looking awkward. The band was on stage, holding their instruments, whispering among themselves. The vast tables on the right were empty wastelands of white linen. "What do we do now?" she asked. Her voice was trembling, but stronger. "The food is here. The cake is here. The band is here." She looked at the emptiness. "It's a disaster," she said. I looked at the left side of the room. My friends were standing up. Mike, the security guard. Sam, the PI. The guys from the union. Their wives. They weren't leaving. They were waiting. They were waiting. "It's not a disaster," I said. "It's a renovation. We stripped out the rot. Now we have a clean site." I looked at her. "We paid for the party," I said. "I'm not letting $40,000 of seafood go to waste. And I'm certainly not letting that band go home early." "You want to stay?" she asked, eyes widening. "I'm hungry," I said. "And I think we need a drink. A real drink. Not that watered-down wine." I turned to the room. I raised my voice. "Everybody," I shouted. The room snapped to attention. "The wedding is off," I yelled. "But the reception is on." A cheer went up from the left side of the room. A genuine, raucous cheer. "Come over here." I waved to my friends. "Move the tables. Fill the empty seats. Eat the oysters. Drink the champagne. If I see an empty glass, I'm firing someone." The tension broke. It shattered like glass. My friends surged forward. They crossed the imaginary line. They took over the VIP tables. I saw Uncle Tommy grabbing a bottle of crystal champagne and popping the cork with his teeth. I turned to the band leader. He looked terrified. He was a jazz musician used to polite applause, not labor disputes. "What do we play?" he stammered. "The Groom's List?" "Burn the Groom's List," I said. "Play something loud. Play something with a heartbeat. You know Motown?" The bass player grinned. "We know Motown." "Then hit it." The band launched into Ain't No Mountain High Enough. The bass line thumped against the floorboards. It was a heartbeat. It was life. "Dance with me, Dad?" Sarah asked. She looked small in my jacket, but she was standing tall. "I have 2 left feet, Sarah," I said, "and my knees are shot." "I don't care," she said, taking my hand. Her grip was strong. "I just want to dance with the boss." We walked to the center of the floor. We didn't waltz. We didn't do a choreographed routine for Instagram. We just moved. We swayed. We spun. I held her up. She held on to me. We danced on the ruins of the lie. We danced in the crater where a fake dynasty had stood 5 minutes ago. My friends cheered. I saw David loosening his tie and laughing. I saw Tommy eating a lobster tail like it was a corn dog. I looked at my hands as I held my daughter's hands. Wide, flat, scarred. They weren't pretty. They would never be manicured. They would always look like leather left in the rain. But they were strong enough to dismantle a fraud. They were strong enough to catch a falling beam. And they were strong enough to hold my daughter up when her world fell apart. And that, I realized as I spun her around, was the only thing that mattered. The old pig and his daughter, safe, strong, and finally free. The music eventually stopped. The adrenaline which had sustained us like high-voltage current finally cut out around 200. We ended up at the 4th precinct. The transition was jarring. We went from the golden, soft-lit fantasy of the ballroom to the harsh, buzzing, fluorescent purgatory of a police station waiting room. The air here didn't smell of orchids and champagne. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and misery. Sarah was still wearing her wedding dress. The hem was stained gray from the precinct floor. She sat on a hard plastic bench, looking like a displaced angel. I had given her my coat again. She was shivering not from cold, but from the shockwave of the evening. "Mr. O'Connell?" A detective with tired eyes and a tie stain approached us. "We have the preliminary statements. You can take your daughter home. The FBI will be in touch regarding the financial seizures." "What about them?" I asked. "Richard and the boy?" "Richard is being held without bail. Flight risk," the detective said, scratching his chin. "The son, Kevin, he's in the holding cell. He's crying, asking for a lawyer, then asking for his dad, then asking for you. Me. He says you can fix it." The detective smirked slightly. "He says it's all a misunderstanding." I looked at the holding area door. A heavy steel slab with a reinforced glass window. "Tell him," I said, standing up and helping Sarah to her feet, "that I only fix things that are worth repairing. Some things you just haul to the dump. We didn't go back to the townhouse. That place was a crime scene of memories now. I drove Sarah to my house. The house she grew up in. It's a ranch-style build on 3 acres of wooded lot. I built it myself 30 years ago. Every joist, every rafter, every copper pipe, my hands placed them. It's not trendy. The kitchen cabinets are solid oak, not that cheap laminate." Kevin liked. "The floors are heart pine. It breathes." We walked inside. The silence was different here. It wasn't the empty, expensive silence of the boutique. It was a warm, heavy silence. The house smelled of wood smoke, and the lemon polish my wife used to use. A scent I kept buying just to remember her. "Go upstairs, honey," I said. "Your room is exactly how you left it." Sarah paused at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at the photos on the wall. Graduation, fishing trips, a picture of me and her mother, laughing, covered in mud from a gardening project. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. Her voice was cracked, raw. "I almost lost all of this." "For him." "You didn't lose it?" I said, locking the deadbolt. Click. "You just got lost for a while." "It happens. The compass spins when you're in a storm." She went upstairs. I heard the shower run. I heard the sound of the wedding dress, that symbol of the lie being taken off. I sat in my recliner in the dark living room. I didn't turn on the TV. I just watched the moonlight filter through the trees outside. My hands ached, a deep, throbbing rhythm in the bone. I poured 2 fingers of cheap bourbon. I raised the glass to the empty room. "We got 'em, Martha," I whispered to the dark. "We got the bastards." Monday morning, 8 hours. I pulled my truck into the reserved parking spot at Stratton Logistics. The sign still said "Reserved for Richard Montgomery, CEO." I got out. I was wearing my work boots, jeans, and a clean flannel shirt. I carried my thermos. I walked into the lobby. The receptionist, a young woman who looked terrified, stood up. "Sir, can I help you?" "Deliveries are in the back." "I'm not a delivery," I said. "I'm the owner." I walked past her to the elevator. I went to the top floor, the executive suite. It was a temple to ego. Glass walls, modern art that looked like spilled paint, and a view of the city that Richard had used to look down on people. The office was full of FBI agents packing boxes. They were seizing computers. Mr. O'Connell, the lead agent, nodded. "We're almost done here. The place is yours. Leave the files," I said. "Take the computers." "I bring my own." I walked into Richard's private office. It smelled of leather and fear. His chair was an ergonomic masterpiece that probably cost $5,000. I sat in it. It was too soft. It swallowed you. No lumbar support. A lazy man's chair. I picked up the phone. "Get me Lydia," I told the receptionist. "Lydia? The accountant who was fired?" "Yes, call her. Tell her she's the new CFO. Tell her I'm doubling her salary. And tell her to bring a shovel. We have a lot of manure to clear out." The next month was the hardest work I'd done in years, and I didn't lift a single hammer. I spent 12 hours a day in that office. I met with the drivers, the guys who actually did the work. They were scared. They thought the company was going under. I stood on a loading dock in the freezing rain, addressing 200 truckers. "My name is Frank O'Connell," I shouted over the wind. "I'm a builder. I don't strip assets. I build foundations." They watched me, skeptical. They had been burned by suits before. "Richard Montgomery is gone," I said. The private jets are for sale. The corporate retreat in Aspen is for sale. The art in the lobby is for sale. I paused. But your pensions? I'm funding them fully. Today, a murmur went through the crowd. I bought this company because it was rotting from the head down, I said. The body is strong. You men are strong. You keep driving. I'll keep the lights on, and nobody calls me sir. You call me Frank. One of the old drivers, a guy with a beard like steel wool, nodded. All right, Frank, he yelled. Let's move some freight. Sarah moved back in with me. For the first week, she slept a lot. Depression is heavy. It pins you to the mattress. But slowly, she started to emerge. She stopped wearing the beige and pastel clothes Kevin liked. She put on her old jeans. She tied her hair back. One Tuesday, I came home to find her in the garage. She had my table saw running. Dust was flying. What are you building? I shouted over the noise. She turned off the saw. She took off her safety glasses. There was sawdust on her nose. She looked beautiful. She looked like herself. A birdhouse, she said. For the backyard? A birdhouse? Yeah. She ran her hand over the wood. I need to build something, Dad. I need to make something that's real. Something that holds up. I smiled. You used the wrong wood, I said, walking over. That's pine. It'll rot in the rain. Use the cedar in the top rack. Cedar, right. And Sarah, yeah? Don't use nails. Use screws. Nails pull out over time. Screws hold. Okay, Dad. We spent the evening in the garage. We didn't talk about Kevin. We didn't talk about the trial, where Kevin pleaded guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence, taking 5 years in minimum security instead. We didn't talk about Richard, who was looking at life. We talked about bevel angles and torque settings. We spoke the language of things that last. 3 months later, I sat on the bank of the river, the water rushing past, cold and clear. The fishing rod was propped against a rock. I wasn't really fishing. I was just listening to the water. Uncle Tommy sat next to me on a cooler. Hear about the auction? Tommy asked, lighting a cigar. Which one? The Montgomery estate. The house. The cars. Everything. Yeah, I said. David told me it didn't cover the debt. Of course not, Tommy spat. It was all leverage. Smoke and mirrors. Tommy looked at me. You look tired, Frank. I am tired, Tommy. I'm 70 years old, and I'm running 2 companies. Sarah helping? She's running the logistics division, I said. She's good at it. Better than me. She treats the drivers like humans. Proficiency is up 20%. Smart girl, yeah. We sat in silence for a while. The sun began to dip, painting the river in shades of gold and iron. You know, Tommy said, exhaling smoke. They really thought they had you. They really thought you were just a dumb animal. I looked at my hands. The knuckles were still swollen. The scars were still there. That's the thing about people like that, Tommy, I said. They look at a wall and they see the paint. They care about the color. They care about the texture. I picked up a stone and threw it into the river. Plunk. They never think about the stud behind the drywall, I said. They never think about the load-bearing beam. They don't understand that the ugly, rough stuff is the only thing keeping the roof from crushing them. They know now, Tommy chuckled. Yeah, I said, watching the ripples fade. They know now. I stood up. My knees popped. Come on, I said, grabbing my gear. Sarah's making dinner, and she promised no oysters. Thank God, Tommy said, standing up. I hate oysters. We walked back toward the truck, the old Ford F-150, dented, scratched, loud. I got in. The engine roared to life, a deep, steady thrum. It wasn't a Porsche, it wasn't elegant, but it would get me home. And that was all that mattered. 6 months into Kevin's sentence, I went to see him. I didn't tell Sarah. She didn't need to know. She was busy overseeing the fleet modernization at the logistics hub, turning Richard's gas-guzzling empire into something efficient. She had moved on, but I hadn't. Not completely. As a structural engineer, you don't just walk away after a collapse. You sift through the rubble. You find the exact point of failure. You document it so it never happens again. The prison was in upstate New York, a low-slung complex of gray concrete and razor wire. It was minimum security. Camp Cupcake, the guys at the yard called it, but it was still a cage. I sat in the visitation room. It smelled of bleach and hopeless men. Kevin walked in. He looked different. The tan was gone, replaced by a prison pallor, the color of uncooked dough. His hair, once gelled and coiffed, was limp and growing out unevenly. He wore a jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He sat down on the other side of the plexiglass. He picked up the phone. "Frank," he said. His voice was scratchy. "I knew you'd come." "Did you?" I asked, picking up my receiver. "Yeah, you're a gloater," Kevin sneered. A flash of the old arrogance, but it was weak now, like a battery running out of juice. "You wanted to see the lion in the cage." "You're not a lion, Kevin," I said calmly. "You're a termite. You eat the house from the inside." He leaned forward, his eyes darting around the guards. "Look, Frank, I've been thinking. I have a plan." I almost laughed. "A plan?" "Yeah. When I get out in 4 years. With good behavior. Maybe 3. He licked his lips. "I know where Richard hid some assets. Crypto keys. Offshore stuff the feds missed. It's huge, Frank. Millions." He lowered his voice to a whisper. "I can give them to you. We split it 50-50. Capital to expand O'Connell. You just need to help me with the legal fees for the appeal." I stared at him. He hadn't changed. The pressure hadn't forged him into something harder. It had just cracked him further. He was still looking for the leverage. "You don't get it," I said. "Get what?" "It's free money." "There is no free money," I said. "There is only work. And theft." I leaned closer to the glass. "I didn't come here to make a deal, Kevin. I came here to perform a final inspection." "Inspection?" "I wanted to see if there was anything salvageable," I said. "Any remorse? Any understanding of what you did to my daughter?" I looked him up and down. "But the foundation is rotten," I said. "Condemned. Don't you walk away from me?" Kevin shouted, his voice rising. A guard stepped forward. "I was going to make her a queen. I was going to elevate your pathetic little family." "She's already a queen," I said, standing up. "She's the CEO of a solvent company. She sleeps at night. She doesn't look over her shoulder. I loved her." Kevin screamed. Desperation was leaking out of him now. "In my own way, I loved her." "No," I said. "You loved the reflection of yourself you saw in her eyes. And when she stopped reflecting it, you tried to break her." I hung up the phone. Kevin was slamming his hand against the glass. He was mouthing words. Pig, peasant, fool. I watched him for a moment. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just the satisfaction of seeing a dangerous defect removed from the structure. I turned my back on him and walked out into the sunlight. 2 years later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was a cold November morning. The wind was whipping off the river, biting exposed skin. We stood at the entrance of the newly completed North Corridor viaduct. It was a massive span of steel and concrete, connecting the industrial port to the highway. It was the first major project completed under the new banner, O'Connell and Daughter Infrastructure. I stood in the crowd, wearing my good wool coat. Sarah stood at the podium. She wore a hard hat, not a prop hard hat, a scuffed white helmet with stickers on it. Safety first. Union Local 44. She looked out at the crowd of city officials, union workers, and press. "My father taught me," she spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and strong against the wind, "that a bridge is an act of faith." She looked at me in the front row. "You trust the steel," she said. "You trust the math. But mostly, you trust the people who poured the concrete. You trust their hands." She gestured to the workers behind her, the guys I had known for 40 years, and the new apprentices she had hired. "We built this," she said. "Not with leverage, not with debt, but with sweat. And it will stand for 100 years. She cut the rib, the scissors snapped. The crowd cheered. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed to the heated tent for coffee and donuts. I stayed on the barricade. I walked to the midpoint, looking down at the gray water churning 200 feet below. Sarah walked up beside me. She took off her hard hat. Her hair whipped in the wind. "We did good, Dad," she said. "You did good," I corrected. "I just signed the checks." You did more than that. She leaned against the railing. I saw the visitation log, she said quietly. At the prison, 2 years ago. I didn't say anything. I just watched a barge pass underneath. You went to see him. I had to check the locks, I said. She smiled. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something. It was my old framing hammer, the one with the hickory handle, polished smooth by decades of my sweat. The head was battered, the claw chipped. I found this in the garage, she said. You haven't used it in a while. I'm retired, Sarah. Officially. She held it out to me. I want you to have it, she said. But not to work. Then what for? Ideally? She grinned. To scare off any future boyfriends who don't know the difference between a load-bearing wall and a partition. I laughed, a deep belly laugh that felt like it cleared the dust out of my lungs. I took the hammer. It felt heavy. It felt right. I think I can manage that, I said. We walked back toward the shore together. My steps were a little slower than they used to be. My back hurt. My hands were stiff. But as I looked at my daughter, walking with the confident stride of a woman who owns the ground she walks on, I realized the construction was finally finished. I had built a company. I had built bridges. I had built a house. But she was the only thing I built that was truly bulletproof. I patted the hammer in my pocket. The work was done. The tools could rest. And for the first time in 40 years, the storm was over.